morning, colleagues. Muy buenos días. Today, we join to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Zoot Suit Riots, an event forever etched in the history of our nation and emblematic of the struggles faced by the Latino community in the United States. I'm joined by some historic figures in their own right. Miguel Vera Lopez, the chair of the Chicano Moratorium Committee, pachuco Manny Alcarez, an avid car enthusiast and historian, keeping that history alive as we know it today. And as you can see behind me, community members, some whose parents and grandparents were victim of that violence. It should not go unnoticed that we are joined in the same chamber where eight decades ago, the LA City Council convened the outlaw of the wearing of zoot suits. Compañeras y compañeros, amigos y amigas, hoy nos unimos para conmemorar el 80 aniversario de los disturbios de los Zoot Suit, un evento grabado por siempre para de la historia de nuestra nación y emblemático de las luchas enfrentadas por la comunidad latina en nuestro gran país, los Estados Unidos. But today we gather to honor the resilience of previous generations that endured violence and to formally apologize for the sanctioned brutality that targeted not just Mexican Americans, but also African Americans and Filipinos and others 80 years ago. We can't turn a blind eye to the reality of our past, because even today there are leaders across our nation who want to hide the shame of the past and erase that history. To that, we say absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Today is our day of reckoning with this history and to talk about what took place during the Zoot Suit Riots. First, let me just mention something about the Zoot Suit itself. Now, originating from African Americans back in Harlem during the 1930s, the Zoot Suit stood as a defiant symbol of self-expression and resistance for black and brown communities, challenging societal norms and reclaiming their identity through fashion. With each exaggerated silhouette and daring style choice, the wearers of Zoot Suits boldly proclaim their right to exist, to be seen, and to be proud of their cultural heritage. In the face of discrimination and oppression, the Zoot Suit became a stylistic act of defiance, an unapologetic statement that our lives matter and that their voices should not be silenced. The violence, colleagues, started back on June 3rd, 1943, when a group of U.S. sailors encountered young Mexican Americans wearing Zoot Suits just right outside City Hall on Main Street here in downtown LA. It quickly escalated into the streets of brutal attacks against the Mexican American community. In the several days that followed, U.S. soldiers organized and targeted not only Zoot Suiters, but they took their violence into Mexican American neighborhoods, including mine, Boyle Heights, and they viciously beat people indiscriminately. Now, let me just emphasize this one more time. You had U.S. military personnel that conducted violent attacks against American citizens, even while 500,000 Latinos were fighting in the Pacific and European theaters during World War II. Over 500 Mexican American boys and young men were arrested simply for looking like me, being a Latino, or looking like Hugo Soto-Martinez, or Monica Rodriguez, or Eunices Hernandez, looking just like us back in that day. And in fact, as I mentioned a few moments ago, even African Americans and Filipinos who wore Zoot Suits themselves back in the day were dragged off streetcars and beaten in this hysteria, just a blocks from here down on Broadway. The flames of this anti-Latino sentiment were fanned back in the day by yellow journalism, regularly on display in newspapers, especially the Los Angeles Times back in the day. The LA Times even characterized then First Lady of the White House, of FDR, Eleanor Roosevelt, as, quote, having communist leanings, end quote, and, quote, stirring race discord for challenging the beatings and the discrimination faced against Mexican Americans. For 80 years, 8 decades, this stain has remained a blemish on our city's history, and with no formal apology until today. And that's why I thank each and every one of you colleagues for supporting this resolution. That's why I introduced this resolution, so that the City of LA could finally take responsibility and apologize for its role effectively sanctioning the violence perpetuated 8 decades ago to commemorate this week as Zoot Suit Heritage Week in Los Angeles. We cannot turn back the hands of time and undo the horrors that were committed, but we can heal and we can move forward together. And we can pay tribute to the Mexican-American youth who faced prejudice, violence, and discrimination during those dark days. We can shine a light on how their resilience and courage paved the way for the civil rights advancement that we struggle and enjoy today. Now, I would just want to underscore this one more time. You had young boys as young as 12 years of age, 13 years, that were violently beaten. They were stripped of their clothes. In fact, some of them were even urinated in public. Acts that exposed this deep-seated racism that targeted Latinos. And just as disgraceful back in the day were the actions of our police department, the LAPD back then, and the city council, this very chamber that we're sitting in today, that we're standing in today. We had the politicians who baited this to go on and to target the youth of Latinos, African Americans, and Filipinos, to strip them of the right to define their own identity. The Zoot Suit Riots serve as a stark reminder of the racial injustice that continues to persist in our society, explicitly seeing Latinos as less than other people, expecting an entire group to accept a place of marginalization and second-class citizenship. Even today, we hear and feel the echoes of this injustice that targets Latinos that targeted Latinos back in 1943. We saw it in the form of Proposition 187 that even the paper of record today endorsed back in 1994. We watched children separated from their families and caged like animals just a few years ago. We saw essential workers being the last in line to get vaccinations during the pandemic. Yes, in a city and county that's majority Democrats, including at the local, state, and federal level. They were still the last in line to get those vaccinations. We see it with ICE raids on working people, and we see it when street vendors are attacked incessantly every day. And we watched it for more than 4 decades, our Congress's inability to pass immigration reform, even when we've had the majority of both chambers and the executive branch. As we commemorate this anniversary, we're all challenged to commit ourselves to promote equality for all. The Zoot Suit Riots were born out of division and hostility, but together, and only together, we can build a society where every individual, regardless of their background, can be respected, thrive, and contribute to the rich tapestry, the beautiful mosaic of so many different ethnicities, so many different hues, so many different origins that makes up the beautiful mosaic of the city of LA, our great city. I am proud to be here with these incredible men and women and this young boy, this young Zoot Suiter, the future of LA. Now, colleagues, it is my honor to introduce the chair of the Chicano Moratorium Committee, Miguel Vera Lopez. And to give you some context, the Chicano Moratorium Committee is an organization dedicated to educating people about the Chicano Moratorium of August 29th back in 1970 and the conditions and the events that led up to it, known as the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. Let's bring up Miguel Lopez. Miguel Lopez, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. The city of LA, all the folks from this city. Greetings to the members of this council. My name is Miguel Vera Lopez. I represent the 50th Chicano Moratorium Committee in Los Angeles, and it is a pleasure to be here today in support of the effort to address LA history and action in commemorating 80 years since the Zoot Suit Riots. We represent the generation that has established a voice since the 1960s and 70s to resist, educate, and act on the many wrongs of the past with action for the future generations. Our mission to commemorate August 29, 1970 and the Chicano Civil Rights Movement annually through education and action brings us here today. We are personally connected to the history, having parents that grew up and worked in the downtown LA vicinity, who were the youth of the 1930s and 40s, who experienced the hatred, violence, and indifferences of the LA political machines, and who raised us to see a better day. We are the generation of United Farm Worker volunteers, student walkout leaders, and anti-war moratoriums, immigrant rights fighters, and Chicano civil rights activism. In fact, we continue to struggle today for dignity, respect, and equality in our mission to set the record straight and to demand recognition in the narrative of history for a truthful account of the past in order to educate our past and future generations. For these reasons and many more, we declare our support with a humble request for this council to join us in recognizing the 80th anniversary of the Zoot Suit Riots in LA, set the record straight as relates to the harm or damage done to the community in the early 1940s, and make a belated apology for the failure of the past leaders to protect and serve our community. It is the decent thing to do for our next generations. But more importantly, it will codify in the record that the leaders of today and tomorrow will stand for dignity, respect, and tolerance for all. I myself personally am a son of a World War II hero who grew up here down the street, a Zoot Suiter, a professional boxer at 16, and a hero of World War II. My mother lived right off 25th and Maple, one of the few workers who the sweatshops of LA. And I remember my mother distinctly telling me when I was a kid how angry and upset she was watching young Mexican kids running down the street naked from having their suit ripped off. So I am the generation to send this message to my grandkids and my great-grandkids. And for me, the struggle continues to educate and to bring this forward. And I really appreciate the fact that at the local, county, state levels, and hopefully soon at the federal level, that these recognitions will play a most important role in setting the record so our children and grandchildren will know the truth of what truly happened. So I thank you for the opportunity and time to address this leadership body today, and struggle always, the 50th Chicano Moratorium Committee of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Gracias, Miguel, and may the memory of your incredible brother from Hermandad Mexicana Nacional, Nativo Lopez, remains with us forever in our hearts. And as we all may know and not know, the Chicano Moratorium Committee continues to fight for peace, liberation, and education about this iconic event, with the understanding that we will move beyond the limitations of our past. Now, it is my honor to introduce a man who has dedicated his life to preserving the history, the culture, and the traditions of the pachuco, who dare to challenge societal norms, create their own identity, and embrace their cultural heritage. Pachuco Manny, also known as Manny Alcarez, is a community leader in the hot rod and lowrider community, organizing cruising events across the Southland and other parts of California as a venue to teach a generation about the recent history of Latinos in California. Now, Pachuco Manny is here today with a dance troupe to transcend us back to 80 years ago, so we can get a little taste, un poco del sabor of how the emerging Latino culture was celebrated back in Los Angeles. But before we get there, let me bring up to our microphone Pachuco Manny. Pachuco Manny.
Good morning, City Council. Pachuco Manny Alcarez, and thank you, City Council, and it's an honor to be here. I didn't think this would ever happen. I'm glad to see it happen. and I've been zooting for 40 years and doing car events in honor of the Zoot Suit Riots. And Miguel said it all. Young boys at 12, 13 years old were stripped of their clothes. And I want the younger generation to be aware of what happened. I talked to a lot of younger generations. Did you guys know Cesar Chavez was a Zoot Suiter? They had no idea. They had no idea he was in the Navy. Cab Calloway was a Zoot Suiter. Malcolm X was a Zoot Suiter. Famous Mexican actor Tintan was a Zoot Suiter. And I just want the younger generation to be aware of what happened 80 years ago. In fact, this week, tonight, was the Zoot Suit Riots were ongoing. And this is what I want the younger generation to know. I want him to know about what happened 80 years ago. So thank you very much.
Gracias, Pachuco Manny. Now, I think that we have a performance. If we're ready, our performers?
Yeah, we're.
All righty.
Where are we going to do that?
I think right out here.
We got some.
Yeah. Yes. Do we have and we have the music lined up? ¡Que vivan los Zoot Suiters! ¡Que vivan los pachucos! Now, Mr. President, we just one quick commentary from one of the famous Rodriguez family, the Rodriguez brothers. You know, where's my brother over here? Go. Come on out. Come on out.
Okay, he told me to make it quick, so I'm going to make it quick.
Because you know what? Got to do work.
You know what? Where I grew up at as a youngster, we used to listen to, we call them the veteranos of the barrio, the veterans of the neighborhood. And some of them were war veterans, World War II veterans. One of them in particular was Mr. Sanchez. He was off in the war miles away, and as he said, he was out there shooting it up, using weapons. Not knowing that his family baptismal party got raided right here in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles. Got raided by a bunch, he said, by a bunch of white people and sailors. They started beating people up. What they didn't realize, though, is that family was a big family, I mean, their relatives, their friends, their neighbors, they were all at that party, and they fought back. They fought back, they defended themselves, and they ran those people out of the neighborhood. So that was one instance where racism was defeated, was combated, but we all know, as the previous speakers mentioned, there was a lot of tragedy. He said he couldn't be here with his family because he had a duty. He took an oath, to be in the service. That same oath is similar to what police officers take. That same oath is similar to what other servicemen take. That same oath is what council members here take and office holders take, and that was dishonored. The uniform of law enforcement was dishonored because police officers, some took part in the beatings. Some arrested innocent people and placed them in jail. And then servicemen also violated that oath by taking part in what they were doing, like was mentioned by the speakers, attacking Mexican people. Another one of the other veterans speaking there, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, Anyway, he mentioned he got arrested. He could only afford the coat. He didn't have the pants. So what they tore off of him was the coat and his shirt. And in jail, he heard, when he was being booked, he heard one of the police officers, yeah, we went we went hunting Mexicans. And he heard the other officers laughing when that police officer mentioned that. You know what, today we have a unique opportunity to correct that. Those of us that have taken the oath. I took that oath when I was a commissioner for community relations. I took that oath when I was a TATA, when I worked for the California State Department of Senate Rules. So that oath is important. That oath was dishonored. Those uniforms were dishonored. So we have an opportunity. It's great what the Councilmember de León is doing. I wholeheartedly support it, and I encourage every council member to support this resolution, this motion, this apology that has long been passed for the kids that were beaten, for the families that are still survivors here to this day, for them to know that there was an apology for the criminal acts that were permitted against our community. Thank you very much for your time.
Before I close, I also want to acknowledge Cristina and Ángela Romero. Es un aplauso, ¿no? Para Cristina Ángela Romero, por favor. Who helped organize and execute this amazing ceremony, along with my staff, Susana Lopez, Sarah Flaherty, Christopher Antonelli. Who else? Am I missing anyone? I want to make sure I give props to all my staff. Roberto's, I want to give them props. It's been my distinct privilege to share today with you, and I want to thank you for the unanimous support of this resolution. As I said earlier, this resolution will not change what happened 80 years ago, but it is a significant step in a long overdue healing process. We should always be striving for healing. Healing is not something that can just be left to time. We must do it together and only together as we move forward. So with that, I think we have some resolutions to give, and then we can move forward,
And I think we have a couple of folks on the queue.
Yes, sir?
I said we have a couple of speakers on the queue as well.
Okay. How would you like to do it, Mr.
Why don't you
President?
take the photo, and then
Okay,
we'll...
yes, sir.
We'll go to Councilman
For the
Rodriguez.
Zoot Suit Heritage Week, I want to thank Mr. President, Mr. Kokorian, as well as Monica Rodriguez, to the Zoot Suiters here today. Que viva! Come on in.
All right, Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. De León, and I want to thank you all for being here with us today to commemorate this terrible piece of city history and for continuing the important role of educating our community and letting people understand that sadly, the attacks on Latinos in this city has not ceased. And this is something that we all must overcome and continue to work on together, whether it's through policy, whether it's through activism. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that our community, and we watch it with policies and legislation that doesn't just come out of this city council, but also comes out of, in Florida, we're watching, we watch how this permeates across all legislative bodies. And so I just want to say my deepest gratitude to you for preserving this important history, for continuing to be the storytellers of how the community has been wronged. My father, too, he grew up in Cypress Park, served in Vietnam, and so Mr. Rodriguez, I don't know, not unrelated Mr. Rodriguez, but good last name, solid last name. I just want to say thank you so much for talking about what it means to honor the oath and the responsibility that is bestowed upon everybody to recognize and commemorate this important history. It should be signed on by everybody, whether it's in City Hall, whether it's in the County of Los Angeles, or up and down the state of California. We're either going to stand united to say that we will not continue to undermine these histories, these important stories, and that we will continue to progress a path forward that respects the contributions of each of our communities and accepts us for who we are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments? Let me just say that we really do appreciate this presentation, Councilman, and the comments made by Mr. Lopez, Manning, and Rodriguez certainly hit home. And of course, we will never forget the live performance here in the Club City Council chambers. They got down. But it was the Zoot Suit Riots, it was a sad time in our history. I'm glad that we are surfacing it now to really talk about what the impact was. And so those who were there, those who were impacted, your comments are certainly well felt. We know that we've got to do a better job. We know that this was not just against Latinos, but also blacks and Filipinos and other people of color were literally targeted because of their clothing and the color of their skin. And we, I think, are all resolved that that will never happen again in our city. And so this is a very poignant reminder of what happened and what should have happened. There was a great story also in the article in the LA Times this Sunday about the riots, and a great picture on that front page, I might say. But we want to just never forget. And so, Councilman, we appreciate your bringing up this morning. And to our guests, we do apologize, and we're glad you're here now. We are all in this together. Again, let's give it up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, colleagues. Que viva los pachucos!
Thank you.